My name is Jerry Gill. Today is June 30th, 2009. I'm visiting Dr. Robert Graalman in the OSU Library on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O State Storage Project, the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Bob, thanks for taking time to come out and visit with us today.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
What if we start kind of at the beginning? Could you go back, Bob, and tell me a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, a little bit about your family?
Right. My family is from western Oklahoma, where I grew up in O'Keene and Fairview. My grandfather and father were both in the banking business in O'Keene and Fairview, and I graduated from Fairview High School in 1965. And I have a sister, Nancy, who also came to OSU and was a student here, a very good student. My dad actually came here as a 16-year-old freshman in 1938 and finished 2 years in the history department and was told that he had completed all the courses so that he needed to go to the University of Minnesota to finish his bachelor's degree. And so off he went, where he graduated from the University of Minnesota. And then during World War II, he was a naval officer and waiting for his assignment after graduating from Officers Candidate School. And he was a person who was very gifted with language and interested in puzzles and various things, and was shipped back to Stillwater, Oklahoma to study the Japanese language at the OSU branch of the Japanese Language School in the Navy. There were campuses here and in Boulder, and he was sent to the Stillwater campus 70 miles from his hometown, where he finished that part of the war. And he learned the Japanese language and was headed to Japan to be an interpreter when the war ended. One interesting thing that you might want to include in your history is that part of OSU's involvement in World War II. Jay Boggs, who may have come up in some of your conversations, pulled me aside one day and handed me my dad's card that he was used to enroll in that program. And he said that there were 100 other cards. And he said that perhaps that group of individuals who studied the Japanese language here was the single most outstanding group of eventual businessmen and academics that he had ever seen come out of OSU, because these were the brightest naval officers from all over the country who were sitting here. So it was a natural that OSU would be in my blood. I always tell people that I was brought here the first time in 1949 as a 2-year-old baby to go to an OSU basketball game, and unfortunately for that game, I was so frightened by the noise they had to take me out. But fortunately, something must have clicked, because I started going to basketball games and haven't missed many since then. For that reason, and for proximity and the family's love affair with OSU is why I ended up here in 1965.
Well, could you share a little bit of your undergraduate experiences, maybe leadership organizations you were involved in, academics, personal life?
Not too many. I was in Beta Theta Pi fraternity, and I was a pre-law major, and was very excited to be at OSU. I did not, people always ask me, because of my job, whether or not I was really involved in the upper realm of academics at OSU, and I have to confide that I didn't really know too much about that at the time. I don't know if that was my own immaturity or if the information just wasn't available, but I was a student who enjoyed every minute that I was here, felt that I learned a lot, and most importantly, met my wife-to-be and made a lot of great friends. And that has been instrumental, I think, in the quality of my life, very much so.
Were there some highlights for you in your undergraduate experience that you recall, events, activities?
Well, I always remember, of course, the first dance. I think that was called the ribbon dance, and I met some really great friends at that the first night at OSU. I was around a group of men who eventually made a big impact on OSU. In fact, Out of my fraternity, there are 3 individuals who've been selected for the OSU Hall of Fame, which I think is a pretty rare thing, in 3 successive years, which is, I think is really remarkable. Don Nichols, Steve Jorns, and Jim Carricker. And I just remember being around those people, that it was always a very stimulating experience, and a lot of talented leaders that I was able to associate with.
Bob, what about I know you went on to graduate school. Could you share a little bit about your graduate
I went to law school for a while, and it didn't click. And I had taken a course here from a famous OSU professor named David Shelley Berkeley, and he was in the English department. I had also met the person who was my fiancée-to-be just before I left for law school, and it was also during a time of great duress for a lot of people because of the Vietnam War. And I don't think people realize how much of an impact that had on young people of the time in regard to their academic planning. But for a variety of reasons, I left law school and came back here to pursue a master's degree in English. And that's really where I think my academic side kicked in. OSU was a great school for me to become acclimated socially, et cetera, as an undergraduate, but graduate school was where I really started to feel the urge to become a better scholar. And I got a master's in English here. Went to the University of Tulsa following that for my PhD in English. Taught there for a while after finishing my degree, and then went off for my first job at Illinois State. After 3 years at Illinois State, a temporary contract that I had expired, and we found ourselves with 2 children and nothing to do. We'd always wanted to live in Stillwater, thinking that perhaps life would even be better for a family in Stillwater than it was for students, and that has turned out to be the case. I came back to Stillwater under very unusual circumstances. A friend of mine knew Bob Ham, a legendary OSU professor. I did not know Bob. But my friend told Bob about my desire to return to Stillwater. And I think Bob's history at OSU has been one of trying to help people's dreams come true. And even though he didn't know me, my friend vouched for me, and he gave me, I'll never forget this, he gave me $500 to come back in 1981 and help him, quote unquote, write a textbook, proofread a textbook. Well, he didn't really need my help that much, but he knew that this would help us. And with that $500, we set up our household, and both my wife and I landed jobs. I was in the Dean's Office of Arts and Sciences, and my wife was and still is teaching English as a second language at the English Language Institute. So out of Bob Ham's generosity to a virtual stranger, I was able to get my start here. And I've always told people I think that's typical of the OSU experience, and it's something that I've tried to turn back to other people.
Bob, what can you share a little bit about the genesis, and early expectations of the scholar program, and a little bit about your personal involvement, just
okay.
the front end of it?
I'll give you a little history on that leading up to the actual establishment of the office.
Right.
After a few years in the Dean's Office of Arts and Sciences, I became OSU's first merit-based scholarship director. We've obviously always had a financial aid director, but we'd never had anyone to coordinate the scholarship program for students of ability without need, some of them. And so in 1988, I was named to that position. And the job description had several elements to it, coordinating applications, recruiting national merit scholars, and various other things that are typical of administration in higher education. And at the bottom of the list, really, was to help students of high ability who wanted to apply for major national and international awards such as the Truman Scholarship, Rhodes, Marshall, the whole list, Udall, Goldwater. There are many. And I had not paid much attention to that because I thought that I was supposed to be doing things that were higher up on the list. And this is one of my favorite stories, other than the Bob Ham story. About 3 years into the job, my secretary was waving at me that someone important was coming through the door, and I looked up to see one of my boyhood heroes, Henry Bellman, which got my attention very fast. In fact, when you think of OSU's heroes, Henry Bellman, Henry Iba, and Henry Bennett, I tell all my students, I don't care what gender of child you have, you need to name them all Henry, because because they're going to be something. And Henry Bellman was on the selection panel for the Truman Scholarship Program, and he was concerned in Henry's sober and emphatic way that he hadn't seen any OSU students come through as interviewees. And he said he'd seen a lot of Kansas State and Texas A&M people, and he knew that we had students every bit as good as that. And then he held up a copy of my job description, and he said, "They tell me that you're responsible for this." And I immediately began saying, "Yes, sir," real fast. And he said, "Well, young man," at the time I was still qualified to be called young man, "maybe you should work a little harder on this." And I said, "Indeed I will." And this is a critical moment in OSU history, because he gave me the business card for the new executive director of the Truman Foundation, which was Lewis Blair. And he said, "If you get this man to campus, he can help you attract and mentor students. And then I think that you'll see the situation pick up." This is Mr. Bellman still speaking. So a few months later, we brought Mr. Blair in, and he gave a couple seminars to students and faculty. Brian Begley was our president of student government at the time, and he was there, and he applied, and he became our first Truman Scholar in that era. There had been several before, back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. But he was the first of a later generation. And then we had, I think, 9 in the next 11 years. And as a result of that, I've become a fast friend of Henry Bellman and a real admirer of him, and I think he of our office. And that has all led to a chance maybe to endow our office with the Henry Bellman Fund, which, looking back, will surely be a highlight of my career, that association.
Was Smith Holt dean?
Smith Holt was Dean of Arts and Sciences, and I left his office in 1988 to take that job. Okay. Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about the inception of the new position in 88 when you moved, the mechanics around that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm gonna put Smith in the category of some of these other people as instrumental to my career. I learned a lot about responsibility and effort from Smith Holt, and creativity. And one of the best employers I've had here or anywhere else. And he was always looking for ways to promote OSU at a very high level through programs that he invented. And I hope somebody is out of his office, maybe Joyce Cox or somebody, could talk about that someday. But he was always encouraging me to go beyond what I was doing in arts and sciences. So when this job came open, he thought I should apply, because in addition to the accounting type responsibilities, which I had no qualifications for, there were also responsibilities for improving the academic profile of OSU. And so Jay Boggs was the person who hired me. Cindy Ross interviewed me. She was in his office, and Jay wanted OSU to have a better system for giving students scholarships. At that time, an incoming freshman had to fill out at least 9 scholarship applications to be considered for all freshman awards, and that was not helping us with our efficiency. And so that was the first thing that we did. And Jay Boggs was also a critical element in the development of our office. And so we hired a couple of secretaries, and off we went, leading up to the story of Mr. Bellman's entrance into our office. And following that, we had about 4 or 5 years of continuation doing all the scholarships. And at a certain point, we realized that we had a really outstanding program that might be able to stand on its own. It was, let's see, who would have been the provost at that time? Probably Norm Durham, Jack Vitek, and of course Jim Halligan decided that we should split off from the scholarship area generally, turn that back over to financial aid, which worked well for efficiency, and then just promote our office as a specific entity for the recruitment and mentoring of OSU students.
And what year was that about?
That was approximately 1994, 95.
That time it really kind of morphed into what it is today.
Correct. And it's been that way ever since. And it turned out that OSU had one of the, we didn't have the first program, but we had one of the first real focused efforts, along with Kansas State, University of Arkansas, to try to get in and make a pitch that the land-grant students could compete in these awards. They'd all been dominated by the Ivy Leagues for many years. So we were really at the forefront of having an overall plan of finding students and getting them involved in these scholarship programs. And not just for winning, but for the entire general education program because of all the students we served.
Were there skeptics, Bob? That we needed this?
I don't know if I'd say skeptics. It was a matter of informing people more than anything else. Yeah, there were some skeptics, as there will be on any college campus of this type, from people who maybe felt that they were misplaced in their academic career and that OSU maybe was a little beneath their aspirations. But boy, when you go around our campus, it's pretty, in spite of what people might think at the time, most faculty really want to see OSU perform well. And most of our faculty really admire OSU students for their efforts and for their genuineness. And so I didn't really find anybody who resisted. I didn't find that many people to get involved right at first. But as the years have gone by, we've gotten more involvement.
What did you say the individual suggested?
I do know, I can follow up on that. I do know that at the beginning, our students faced some problems because around the country, OSU did not have a reputation for success in these. And in fact, because of some things out of our control, there were some people who kind of made fun of some of the OSU preparations, academic preparations. And for instance, our first Rhodes Scholar really suffered from that. I think his name was, I can't remember now. But he faced a rather hostile Rhodes interview. And always, I think, felt upset over that because he didn't deserve that kind of treatment. And then Brian Begley, the Truman winner, also applied for the Rhodes. And at the state interview, he was actually interviewed a second time. And he said that the feeling was that they really couldn't believe that an OSU student was performing that well in a Rhodes interview. And they brought him back after everybody had left to run him through his paces again. And I really think that he broke ground for Blaine, who came along a few years later, and several others.
There was a lot of conversation around that period, I recall, that felt like Brian should have been,
He should have been,
really selected.
Yeah.
And had the qualifications.
He did, no doubt about it. I think if he had come after Blaine, he probably would have.
Bob, how did you become involved in this program in terms of emotionally, and where does your passion for this program come from? This is the kind of job you've got to feel very strongly about it to do?
Well, I will say that while my affair with OSU was rich and complete in all regards, I had mentioned earlier that I didn't really think that I took as advantage of the academic side of things compared to the opportunities I was given. And so the opportunity maybe to return some of that might eventually balance the scale a little bit. I'm not ashamed to say that. I have a lot of interest in academics now, and I just feel with this job that has been cultivated for the entire of my life, which is a rare opportunity. I'm just as excited about it now as I ever have been. Another thing is that while I really wanted to work at OSU, I would have been willing to do nearly anything. The fact that what many people think is the best job in higher education came my way is beyond comprehension. And I think everybody finds at least one thing in his or her life that he can do well. For some reason, I can do this well. And I've been the president of a national organization of people who do what I do, and I've had opportunities to go elsewhere and do this. But for some reason, I feel absolutely that I'm in the perfect place doing what I was destined to do somehow. And it's been a real exciting opportunity for me.
Well, who have been some of the other faculty and staff who have been instrumental in helping launch and establish the program?
Well, I have to name one especially. Dr. Edward Jones of the English department has been my right-hand person and confidant throughout. You asked earlier if there's anyone who, or if we had any skeptics. I would say the other end of the spectrum is Edward Jones, who encouraged me from the very beginning that OSU students were every bit as equipped to do this, and we should never take a back seat to anyone else. So he and I sort of joined forces, and we have been together virtually for every practice interview we've had in this program since those early years. And he even started getting me in physical shape by inviting me on runs on Sunday morning, where he would help planning and talk about students, and we actually did a lot of the preparation out on those
In between
jogging. But Edward is a well-known international scholar in a very esoteric field, and it's no accident that 3 of his students who got major awards have received graduate degrees overseas in the United Kingdom. Kelsey Williams is now getting a PhD at Oxford. Joel Halcomb is getting his PhD in history, who's a Gates Scholar, is getting his PhD at Cambridge. And Blaine Gredeman was also someone that he worked with. And when Edward tells me he's got a student in his sights, then I always listen. We've had other faculty who've gone to England. I'll talk about our overseas program at some point. But
there have been other champions. You mentioned administratively, Jay Boggs and some others, but again, faculty, staff, administrators that have been very supportive of you.
Yeah.
Want to share any of those names?
Yeah. Well, Gail Gates has been my longest serving boss in the provost's office. And for a while there, I was turning over a new assistant provost or associate provost every 2 or 3 years. So after 6 or 7 years, I wondered what she was up to, because she was still asking questions and seemed interested. So I have to give her a lot of credit. Jack Vitek was instrumental because he too thought that OSU had a lot of talent that wasn't being utilized. And he also helped us to orchestrate the transition of the Wentz program to the Wentz Projects research program that I supervise. And he was really determined to get that done and get that done the right way.
Now, the Wentz Projects, Bob, you explain that just a little bit.
Okay. Well, have you talked about the Wentz to anybody yet? Might want to get Trish Houston in here to do that. I'll just get off subject a little bit.
All right. Okay.
She's a real historian of Lou Wentz.
Okay.
And the Lou Wentz program, I'll just give you some background. He gave OSU back in the 30s.
I know about that.
Yeah, some money, and then added to it with some oil leases. And for a while, we used that money as a loan program, and then eventually a work-study program, which it was really up through the 70s and 80s, and very popular, very successful. But about the time that Jim Halligan arrived, the Wentz board decided that they wanted, for the new generation of students, that it needed to have a different structure. And so they encouraged us to start a research program and a leadership program. And so we've had that for about 15 years.
That's what I was asking about.
Yeah. We've given approximately 50 research projects, very valuable awards, high dollar awards, to our top undergraduates for them to conduct year-long research projects in whatever field, not just sciences, but in the humanities too, with a faculty mentor. And I really think of all the things that have happened with OSU undergraduates, this conversion is the one thing that really gave our undergraduates a chance to shine academically. Jim Halligan was involved in that. Trish Houston is the doggedly determined Lou Wentz administrator who has supported this program throughout, along with a fascinating board of directors, all of whom have links to Lou Wentz the man through family ties and business ties. And so over the years, that's been a really gratifying association.
Other faculty members you mentioned.
Doran Recker has taught for me in Cambridge at our Cambridge program. We have he is the head of the philosophy department and a history of science person. We've had let me just give you an example of why I'm struggling to name certain names with this. In my national organization, I'm always asked about the success of our program and why we've had so many young people win these awards. And I always tell them it's because of faculty. And when I tell them the numbers who get involved in any given year as research mentors, practice interviewers, and so on and so forth, they can't believe our good fortune because at most schools you can count them on one hand. Well, here, in every department across campus, I'm able to find faculty members who are willing to get involved, and that's been an important key. Just in the English department, for instance, I could name several: Ed Walkowitz, Carol Motor. In history, Jeff Cooper is constantly recommending students who become great scholars. He was the person who introduced me, for instance, to Blaine Gretaman and Joel Halcomb, because he'd spotted them in freshman history class, even though they weren't history majors at the time. So that sort of story, I think of Charlie Hendricks in Human Environmental Sciences, who loves the Wentz program. Carl Reed in engineering. I can't go past history, engineering, without a whole handful of faculty members who love to promote their students for these awards. And Carl has been just a tremendous advocate for OSU students over the years. Current Dean of Arts and Sciences, Peter Sherwood, is a graduate of Magdalen College in Cambridge, where we take our students every summer. And he always comes over and gives a presentation and a tour of the area. So I'm worried that I'm going to leave somebody out like that, but maybe I can get back to you if I, yeah.
How has the scholar development program, how has it evolved since its inception, Bob? What are some new components and different facets of it since you started it?
Yeah. Well, I already talked about the Wentz program. And we get about 120 applications every year for the 50 or 60 awards that we give. And that wasn't in place when we started. So at the time, all we were supposed to do was to help students with their essays and interviews to make them better candidates. But with the Wentz Research and Leadership Program, then we were able to push our students to a higher level as they get ready for these national scholarship competitions. Then we also, through the generosity of Blaine Gretaman, our first Rhodes Scholar, went to Oxford in 1997, I want to say, 97 or 98. He felt so grateful, he may have mentioned this in his interview, he felt so grateful about what had happened to him at OSU that he wanted to return that in the UK. So he invited some of our best students over to study literature with him at Oxford. Out of that, we went there a couple of years and went to Cambridge, where we currently have a regular base of operations every summer. And that program is another factor in our success and another important year-long project that we put together. One year we took 15 students to Cambridge out of that program. 11 of them applied for major national and international awards, and 7 won. An astonishing rate of success. Nearly half of those students who went over there won one of the top awards in the country. So we know that experience, the Wentz experience, etc., have been critical. Another thing that we did that has been instrumental, that wasn't in place at the time, is have some curricular offerings. I always teach a class in honors literature, which is the highlight of my year. The Honors College. I should have mentioned Bob Spurrier. I knew I was going to forget somebody. Bob Spurrier has been probably as critical in this area of university effort as Edward Jones, because of the quality of the Honors College and his interest in seeing what these kids do. So I want to make sure to emphasize that. I should have mentioned him earlier. But he gives me a literature class in the Honors College to teach. I connect and network with freshmen as a result of that. And then a famous OSU celebrity, Jeff Pill, whom you know well.
Jeffrey Pill.
Was a UK citizen who taught here for over 40 years. And he always had a dream that OSU would have a Rhodes Scholar or a Marshall Scholar. And he actually started the first group of students, practice group, in the 60s and 70s, who would meet at his house and talk about the news, current events, practice interview. And they did that for quite some time. And then he developed a course called Windows to the World, so that they could formalize that otherwise informal group with a 1-hour seminar. And they read, I believe, the Christian Science Monitor, and they discussed those events, and he put them through their paces. And after I'd been in this office for a year, Bob Spurrier again recommended that we dust off that course. And I started teaching it, and we started with 8 people in the bottom of Stout Hall. Blaine Gretaman was in it, Chris Stevens, and a couple of others who won awards. And ever since then, that program has grown, and we now teach 16 students in 2 sections every spring semester. So Jeff has left his mark, and in fact, I thought you might want this for your records. This I consider to be one of the most gratifying historical moments in OSU that OSU could have, because this is Jeff Pill in the middle, and this is our first Marshall Scholar, Chris Stevens, who is also a Truman Scholar, and this is our first Rhodes Scholar, Blaine Gretaman. At this point, Jeff had retired from OSU and was living in a nursing home in Keswick, England. Bill Ivey, a longtime OSU administrator and a close friend of mine, recommended that we take those 2 young men to Keswick and introduce him to Jeff, which we were able to put together. And I think I can speak for everyone who was in that room that to see those 2 young men with Jeff Pill was probably one of the most emotionally gratifying experiences that an educator could have. It was a moving and exciting time to be able to do that, and I think that it's an important part of the OSU historical record. So I thought I'd leave that with you if you want it. I don't know if visuals work or not, but I've also got it electronically if you want it. So
Can you talk a little bit about the process for identifying students, how you identify and recruit students into the program?
Yeah.
You touched on it a little bit earlier, but could we go into more detail maybe?
Well, at first we just worked on campus, and the way that we did that was primarily word of mouth. I mentioned Brian Begley coming for Lewis Blair's seminar way back, and before long people heard what our office was supposed to do, and they'd come in and say, I'm going to apply for a Goldwater scholarship, are you supposed to help? And we did that. And we put together some committees to help us pick these students who'd be able to be our nominees. And because there was an explosion of these kind of awards, such as the Udall and the Mitchell, that we needed to have committees so that we could send candidates forward who were indeed qualified, and they just didn't go off on their own without any help. Eventually, the faculty got involved and began to refer their students with our encouragement. At the beginning of every fall semester, we send out a letter to all faculty saying, have you spotted anybody yet who is well-read? We're not just looking for students with good grades, but students who are well-read, who like to argue, who sit at the front and can write well, and seem to want to do more than just make good grades in your class, but really have the desire to broaden themselves. In addition, those who are leaders and those who are not just single majors, but have dual majors with minors and want to learn language and travel and that sort of thing. We usually get about 200 referrals every fall semester.
Out of the 200, Bob, how many will you?
We'll invite them. We'll invite all of them to a reception. So they're all in if they want to be in. Usually out of those 200, about 100 will show up for that first reception, 80 to 100. And then we give them a lot more details about travel, research, and the various programs and what they need to do to stay involved. And then it's just kind of up to them how much advantage they want to take of our office. A lot of them are honors students, but not all. About 80% of the students in scholar development are honors, but not all of them. And out of those 80 or 100, about 50 will stay involved for a while. And then by the time that group is a senior, there'll be 10 to 15 who are still plugging along, applying for major awards or doing something really remarkable. Like
they sort of self-select themselves out, really.
Yeah, and what we like to talk about is that it's not just the winning scholars that have meant a lot to OSU, but when you think that there are at least 400 or 500 students who come through our office every year to do research or to travel or do leadership, we think that we have a bigger impact on the general education program. And even if a student never applies for a major award, just by upgrading his profile, learning a language, whatever, then we've helped on a. I know it would not be a healthy thing for my job if I just had to bank on having a Rhodes Scholar every year. That's hard to do, as we know.
You'd like to have one every year, though.
Yeah. We've got one in a couple of years, I think, but we'll see about that.
Well,
but there's also now we're actually doing some high school recruiting, and that's been very helpful. And now, when families come to my office to talk about OSU, they talk about research and overseas travel much earlier than they used to, and this has become a recruiting tool. And we've had some students who've turned down awards at Stanford, Duke, the Ivy Leagues, because first of all, they feel more comfortable staying in state and it's less expensive. But they know that they're going to have a real intense experience in the Honors College and in my office that is very suitable because the record shows that they can be prepared. So that's been fun too.
Well, I want to pick up on your comments a little bit earlier about what defining success for your program.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate a little more about what really your goals or your aspirations are for your program beyond just getting award-winning students?
Yeah. Well, it's primarily that, and everybody associated with our program knows that if you give every undergraduate a research experience, a travel experience, and help them learn to write essays better, this would be a better place generally. Now, we don't have the resources to do that for more than the 300 or 400 that we have right now. But I would certainly like to see some aspects of the program broadened. But we couldn't have 40 or 50 Rhodes candidates every year, so that's not possible. So my goals are to see that we keep our record intact of turning out students who win Goldwaters and Marshalls on a regular basis, but also that the whole university benefits through things like the WINS program and the overseas program.
Do you have any plans for expanding the program?
Well, we could, if this endowment works, then we could maybe add more sections of the program overseas. We could add more research opportunities, etc. At any school, there is a critical mass of people who really want to do this. And you have some who just want to kind of dabble on the fringes of it. But when you meet one who really has what it takes, it's almost like an athletic coach who sees somebody who's going to be a real strong athlete. You can tell within seconds that there is a real active mind, a real competitive spirit there, and somebody who intends to go way beyond what other students do. And if I talk to people like Bob Spurrier or Edward Jones, they understand that too. Jeff Cooper, and they send them our way.
Bob, back to the competition for your national scholarships, national recognition awards. Can you talk a little bit about the process, about how you prepare students to be successful in the interview and application stage?
Right. We have kind of a checklist of things we like the students to go through, and that first year is just to get established academically, and we encourage them to take on more, especially with language and minor areas. If they're in business, we'd like to see them take a minor in literature or philosophy or something like that. If they're in literature or philosophy, well, we love to see them take a minor in physics or mathematics or psychology or something, just to show that they're not limited and too focused in terms of their aspirations. We urge that a lot of these people are so involved in their public schools that they tend to overburden themselves socially. So we tell them to start slowly, join a club, join a political organization, but to keep it small until they know they're established academically, and then they can bust out and do a whole bunch of things if they want. But you do see some people who get so overwhelmed, which is typical of a land-grant school such as ours, who want to do so much public service that they don't get their academic things going. We urge them to apply for research. We have an incoming research program for freshmen that gives them an orientation to research, and we urge them to think about trying to get an article published by the time they're a junior, which would almost guarantee that they're a good candidate for a Rhodes or a Goldwater scholarship.
Do you have a class for that, or just
we have a class for freshmen. Yeah, right. That's funded by the foundation. The Roberson Trust funds that freshman research program, which has been really useful. We tell them to start doing something outside of campus, and maybe volunteer for food drives, do something that shows they're committed to society in their sophomore and junior years. Get out of the country, not just to travel, but to go spend time in the country and have to survive by living in the country, studying in the language, whatever it might be. And then, of course, to look at the list of major awards that are out there and see which ones they feel most suited for, and then start thinking about what sort of profile they would try to project as they apply. And then we're there whenever they need help. And then if they get an interview for one of these awards, then we put together a team of faculty who give them a really rugged practice interview, so that when they walk into that important interview, they're not so intimidated by the kind of questions that are going to be asked.
Could you expand a little bit, Bob? For example, with the committee you put together to give them a mock interview, would it be put together for a basic scholarship, whether it's Marshall or Truman or Rhodes? Would it be a little different kinds of questions you ask, the composition of the faculty?
Yeah, it depends on which scholarship it is. We'd have a whole different set of interviewers for a Truman, which is more leadership, than we would for, let's say, a Rhodes or Marshall, which is going to focus primarily on academics. So, we have a kind of a ready group of people out there for Gates, Marshall, Rhodes, Mitchell. Some of the programs don't require interviews, but for the ones that do, we have experts who really know how to work these students into a trap.
And then you sit down, and then do you go over the results with them and coach them?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, we had a really entertaining time with Blaine when he went through his, because you may recall that he had spiked hair, and there was a long discussion about how he should leave his hair for his Rhodes interview, which was actually more comical than it was serious. But we go over. We videotape these things. We recommend that they hold their hands, above the table and maintain eye contact, and we're not doing anything really that much different from what would happen on an athletic field. And I think that's another thing that has attracted me to this, is I'm a pretty competitive person, and I have talked to coaches, and I feel a real strong bond there, because we work for a long time for one big performance, and it's at the highest level of competition, and it's painful when they don't get it, and exhilarating when they do.
Well, how important to the Scholar Development Program and OSU was Blaine Graalman being recognized as OSU's first Rhodes Scholar?
It was a watershed moment. Now, there were two watershed moments, I would say. Jim Halligan, and I would agree, would say that the designation of OSU as a Truman Honor Institution was what changed the perception of OSU locally and nationally, where we knew we were among the very top schools in that program, and that we needed to never again shuffle our feet and hesitate about what we can do here on campus. That was in the year 2000.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, every year the Truman Foundation picks 3 or 4 schools that have achieved at a high level in leadership and academics, and they base it on performance in the Truman Foundation. In the Truman Scholarship Program. And in 2000, we were informed that we had been chosen as Oklahoma's first Truman Honor School. And we had a big banquet, and the foundation came down and presented us with a plaque, and we had all of the Truman scholars who had ever been picked by OSU were there, and a couple of them got to speak. And it was a real, as I say, exhilarating feeling to know that we were really up there. But Blaine's was different, because the Rhodes is such a prestigious award, and the fact that we had never had one, of course, because the Rhodes is usually associated with humanities, liberal arts, kind of like Phi Beta Kappa, the Honor Society. It was perceived as kind of being the province of the Ivy League, and we had dismal experiences with the Rhodes. It just seemed like we could never get beyond the state level. So Blaine laid it all on the line, and really had a charmed interview, I should say. Everything worked out just beautifully. And it's one of those things that if you just hit it right, sometimes magical things can happen, and it did. One thing that people don't remember is that his wife, Mandy Bozarth, was the candidate the next year, and she probably deserved it every bit as much as he did. But I think that the Rhodes people probably were a little suspicious of that. She was in the first year. Blaine was the first scholar ever to be married and be a Rhodes Scholar. That was the first year that they allowed married scholars. And he became such a celebrity that the Chronicle of Higher Education did a cover story on him, because at the same time that he won that, we had been instrumental in starting a national organization of advisors who work in this area. Harvard had not won a Rhodes Scholar, or had not had a Rhodes Scholar that year. Meanwhile, Kansas State, OSU, and Arkansas, and I believe several other Midwestern state schools had. And so the Chronicle wanted to go, what's going on here?
Well, they
So they took a picture of Blaine and interviewed him and interviewed me and several others, and that was an exciting time too. There was another incident. I would say I have to add, I'm going to get way off the track here and start talking about my students, which would take us another couple of hours. But probably the most exceptional thing that happened, which, because it wasn't nationally as recognized as the other two, occurred when Ashley Hildebrand, who was already a Goldwater Scholar, and Joel Halcomb both won Gates Cambridge scholarships in the same year. And they only gave 34. And the Gates was a new kind of Rhodes-like scholarship, but associated with Cambridge instead of Oxford. And the list of multiple Gates winners that year, I love telling this story, the list of multiple Gates winners read Harvard, I think, 4, Yale 4, Princeton 3, Brown 2, Stanford 2, Oklahoma State University 2, and that was it. And that was a moment of great satisfaction. I'm not sure about the numbers from the other schools. I apologize if any of them object to that. It might be a different list, but that was the gist of it. Is that OSU had, in that most remarkable program, the 2 winners at the same time. So Blaine, the Truman, and that were critical. Now, Blaine also, of course, contributed later with his experience in Oxford, and then leading to our Cambridge. Then he came back and taught this year for us, this past year, on our faculty. And I think that his OSU connections and his gratitude towards OSU are also a part of the OSU experience that I've enjoyed.
Well, Bob, maybe we just kind of add on to our conversation a little bit about what are the highlights and achievements of the program, our scholar recognition, number of awards. You mentioned some of those, but off the top of your head, can you share some of the successes we've had in the program?
Well, we've had over 50 winners of this level of award in the last 15 years. And what was really neat for me and all of us was that our alums got very excited about this. And one person who needs to be mentioned, who probably more than any other alum became involved, I'm going to name several here now that I started thinking. Jim Whiteneck and Carol Whiteneck are alums in the Tulsa area. He's a surgeon, and Carol is not a graduate of OSU, but she loves OSU, and their daughter graduated from here. Jim was excited by what we were doing and made me an offer once that if he could ever help with anything, that he would be happy to do that. Once we started racking up these awards, we wanted to recognize them. And he offered to build what we know as the Scholar Wall, the Halligan Wall of Scholars in the Student Union at significant expense. And that wall is nearly filled now. But when he built it, we only had about half of them. And his encouragement and his excitement, I think, is reflective of what alums around the country have felt for the program. We had a person who stepped forward who was my college roommate at one time, Jim Carricker, who got excited about the Scholar Development Program and has made gifts that have allowed us to continue our overseas study program, and has been a very influential supporter of the program in many ways.
You've had over 50 major award recognitions
And hundreds of candidates.
And how
Last
many
15 years.
over?
Last 15 years.
Last 15 years.
Yeah. I think that the one story that is the most meaningful to me from a personal and an OSU sense has to do with a scholar who didn't seem to be able to lose, Brian McLaughlin, who was a Goldwater winner, a Marshall winner, USA Today All-American, and an SF Fellow. 4. The dollar value of his awards was incalculable sometimes. He had a particular gift for interviewing that was as good as any that I've seen, and you could not stump him. He could not fail in an interview, and his results were astonishing. He graduated with his PhD from Cambridge and is now working in Boston, in the Boston area. During that same time, we had a person who was every bit as qualified, named Bart Fisher, who is a triple major, perfect GPA, just as genuine and hardworking as anyone you would ever want to meet. And he also wanted to succeed, and he was a finalist in the Truman competition, in the Marshall competition, and the Goldwater competition. Well, Bart was quite the opposite. For all of his wonderful qualities, he could not interview. He could not interview. I don't know if it was stage fright or what, but he could hardly get past the most basic parts of an interview, and it was heartbreaking because we knew he had every bit as much to offer as Brian, and some of their activities were occurring at about the same time. So we'd be in one room celebrating with Brian, and in another room, comforting Bart, who was just so frustrated. His practice interviews were always really quite good, but for whatever reason. So this story got around to some administrators and some alums, and one of them approached me. He's always wanted to remain anonymous. One approached me and said, "If you can get some support on campus, I'll write a check to send Bart to Cambridge, his dream." So we were able to find local support because the departments that Bart had worked in were more than happy. Agriculture, business, my office, etc. And this man wrote a scholarship. So Bart went to Cambridge, and I've got a prized picture of both him and Brian in their graduation regalia at Cambridge, holding up the OSU sign as honors graduates of Cambridge. Now, I just have to say that giving back to OSU, Bart told me someday I'm going to give a lot of money to OSU and whatever else I can do. But isn't that the epitome of the OSU experience?
Great story.
Yeah, I love that story.
Bob, earlier in the interview, you're talking about Brian McLaughlin in the story, which is a great story. Can you share some success stories about other students that participated or
Sure.
have gone on later in their life?
Yeah, and we do notice that winning one of these awards is not necessarily a guarantee that the students are going to continue to have unlimited success later on, because we have just as many students who go on who haven't won the awards but who've come through our program and do wonderful things as well. But there are some that deserve to be mentioned. The first Truman Scholar, Brian Begley, has had a fascinating life. He was asked to be the chairman or the CEO of Phillips Petroleum's kind of right-hand person, trainee, I guess you'd call him, for several months, and then sent to Norway and England, where he was a Phillips official. Then he went off to Harvard to get his business degree, and he was recruited by McKinsey Consulting Group, which is the biggest consulting firm in the country, and spent several years becoming a partner of McKinsey. And then he just recently left that to become a manager of a big foundation in New York City, and he commutes from Dallas to New York every month and every week, for 4 days. And he is also now back involved at OSU on some sort of foundation board and is helping us raise funds for the Bellman Endowment and that sort of thing. I think of Blaine Greteman, of course, who not only has worked at OSU, but he was a correspondent for Time magazine in England after he finished his Rhodes Scholarship, and is now going to be teaching at the Iowa Writers Conference, which is the most prestigious writing school in the world, probably. Kyle Jones is the son of famous OSU graduates, as you know. He was a strong Truman candidate. In fact, his not receiving a Truman was one of the biggest surprises of my life. I thought he was the ultimate kind of Truman scholar, but he did receive a Pickering Scholarship, which gave him all of his educational expenses and guaranteed employment with the Foreign Service after a degree at Harvard, which they paid for. Cassie Mitchell is a great OSU story. She came to OSU as an athlete, but contracted a rare infection that caused her to become paralyzed. And she switched to chemical engineering and became a Goldwater Scholar and a USA Today All-American, and is just now finishing her PhD at Georgia Tech, where she is working on batteries for spinal cord use, because she has to undergo surgery every 4 months, very painful surgery, to have new batteries replaced, and she's trying to invent a battery that will last at least a year, which is how I understand her work. I know that she's very involved in that. She was a great story, both during her stay and after. Ashley Hildebrand has just graduated from MIT with her PhD, and she has just been hired by Conoco Petroleum and has actually sent her work to the federal government on carbon sequestration, which is a big topic now for the environment. And she is destined to become one of OSU's all-time great graduates. We've had students who've won national awards in aeronautics, who've won Goldwaters this past year. We had a young man who set a world record for pilotless aircraft remaining aloft within a limited space or something like that. It would be easier probably for me to comment on what these students have done afterwards in 10 or 15 years, because right now a lot of them are just getting out of graduate school and getting started. But I think the easiest way to describe it is to say that they have really taken the world's best graduate schools by storm. Chris Stevens is a story that needs to be told. He was our first multiple winner, exactly, Chickasha. His parents were historical ag teachers, and I believe his mother was the first ever female graduate of ag communication or something like that. Chris was a very humble, quiet-spoken person who told me that he wanted to be a Truman Scholar, which he did in fine form, and then he became a Marshall Scholar. With his Marshall Scholarship, he was able to get 2 degrees in the United Kingdom. He got a master's in Oxford and a master's in Cambridge. And deciding that he was on a roll, he then applied for law school at Yale. And out of, 5,000 applicants, he was one of 2,000 who were accepted. And he eventually served on the Yale Law Review, graduated brilliantly, and is now an assistant U.S. attorney based in Oklahoma City, after having been in private practice for a few years. So that's the kind of story you hear again and again from these young people who really set their sights high. And
Bob, it just occurred to me, perhaps we should ask this question, probably ask it sooner in the interview. When you're talking about Gates, Udall, Rhodes, Truman, how many a year totally are offered in one
There are
year?
32 Rhodes Scholarships every year, approximately 35 Gates and Marshalls. There are 300 Goldwaters, which is, the Goldwater is the most prestigious science award in the country. There are approximately 70 UDOLs, which is a new and very popular program that several OSU students have won.
Truman, how many?
Truman gives about 70. They give one per state and then 20 at-large scholarships. We have this past year just said goodbye to a person who is eventually going to make her mark. That's Courtney Timmons, who is a legendary OSU student for having won both a UDOL and a Truman Scholarship. Plus, she started the nationally known now tailgate recycling program that has given OSU a lot of credibility. She has a group of students, or had a group of students, that went around to football games and helped to clean up the messes that the alums sometimes caused at their tailgate parties, and collected tons and tons of refuse, and then became OSU's Recycler of the Year as a result of that, and then went on to parlay that into some international awards. So,
Bob, so you feel like the scholarship program, whether some of the students receive those awards or not, impacted, influenced their lives? Do you have some personal stories about perhaps some of the students who didn't win the prestigious awards? But
well, certainly Bart is the best example of that, the person who was able to go to Cambridge. Let's see, which story would I like to tell? We try to stay in touch with students who don't win the awards, even if they apply later. Matt Morgan is someone who applied for all of those awards and didn't receive an award, but went to Cambridge with our program, did research, and even now he is known for his success as a public servant and is going to law school at the University of Michigan, I believe it is. I may be mistaken about that. And is constantly asking how he can contribute back to the program.
You have sort of a mini alumni group in your program?
You know, that's something we need to do a better job of, and I'm working on that, because I think that this group is going to be the new breed of OSU donors somewhere down the line, entrepreneurs. OSU's had a certain kind of donor quality over the years, as you know, because of the land grant image that we have. And I think that these students, not just the ones in this program, but the ones who've won President Distinguished Scholarships, valedictorian scholarships, and all of those things that have been a part of OSU's recent history, will someday really come to the fore and start making generous donations. I don't know if I'll be able to see that or not, because some of them still have some time before they get into leadership positions, et cetera. But boy, they're going to be a powerhouse group. Yeah.
The old cliche about you plant the tree, someone else enjoys the shade.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Bob, you bring up an interesting question. What kind of interaction is there between the academic programs? You mentioned the PDS scholarship program. We've got Bob Spur's
PLC.
And the President's Leadership Council. And what kind of interaction and coordination is there with those kinds of groups and offices and services?
You mean with the Scholar Development Program, or just generally?
Yeah, how do you interact with those others?
Yeah. Well, I give speeches to all those groups all the time, and my involvement in the Honors College is intense and gratifying. I mean, I'm always over there working with students, and now that their new building is going to go up, we're going to try to maintain our visibility with the Honors College. I speak to the PLC class, the incoming PLC class, every year, and a lot of our scholars have come out of that program. I give speeches to a lot of orientation classes in every college every fall, and encourage students to set their sights high. Camp Cowboy, I've done that a little bit, not as much as some of the others, because a lot of our Camp Cowboy participants are kind of new to the state, and they probably aren't quite ready to focus yet for that experience on the kinds of messages that we have. But Alpha, we do a lot of work at Alpha. And as I say, the nicest thing now is that as I'm walking across campus, people like Kent Sampson or Steve Hasley or Carl Reed or somebody will say, I just met this person and you really need to talk to them. And I say, send me an email and we'll contact them.
And that's kind of where I was going with that, is that there's a lot of interaction between yourself and other academic units on campus.
Yeah.
Organizations.
From what I can tell nationally, the excitement and enthusiasm for our program has remained longer than a lot of the campuses where after they have their first rush of excitement, it kind of dies out. I think that there's every bit as much excitement now when one of our students wins a Goldwater or a Marshall or something as there was 15 years ago when it first happened. And again, I attribute that to the quality of the faculty and the atmosphere here that is both competitive but also humble. And the fact that OSU is getting recognition on a national level, I think, still gives people a real charge.
Well, Bob, perhaps you talk about the kind of how that synergy between students and university and alumni. How has the Scholar Development Program collectively influenced the university? We're talking about how it influenced the students, how it's influenced our alumni, how has it influenced our university?
Well, in several ways. I think that more OSU students have been going to really high-quality graduate schools. Personally, I know that when OSU shows up at Magdalen College in Cambridge, the faculty and staff around there say, we're really glad you're back. We're happy that you're here. And we have receptions there where a lot of the local Cambridge crowd comes because they've heard so much about OSU students. So what we've known all along, for as long as OSU's existed, is now clear on an international level. It's not because of me, it's because of our students and their genuine kind of honesty, integrity, and work ethic that they bring to whatever task there is. I think that our involvement with the development of the NAFA, the national organization, has been crucial because, for instance, this week I'm speaking at the National Convention on the history of this whole advising component of scholar development. So there will be around 350 advisors from all other schools representing over 200 colleges and universities, and I'm the only university speaker during that at the banquet for that conference. So again, that's not just for me. That's because OSU has invested in this program, and everyone now locally as well as internationally understands that it has a real impact. One story that I didn't tell that I planned to was that when I gave my first speech as scholarships director 20-some years ago, I used the word elite in that speech, and I was actually told that that's a kind of a awkward word for OSU to use in a public context because it has connotations of arrogance and overconfident. Land grant, we're all about equality and being open and opportunistic and so on and so forth. And I was kind of taken aback by that. I felt horrible because it was one of the first speeches that I gave in my new job. But I did say, and I was probably lucky to keep my job, I said, well, I assume we want to have an elite football program. And, so I don't know what got into me because I'm not usually that kind of a person, but now other people refer to this as an elite opportunities at OSU. Well, that word is not as bad as it sounds in this context. And I think that's something that that doesn't change anything about OSU. It just adds another component to it, because in my experience, we certainly haven't given up on everything else that makes OSU the way it is. But we now have something new, too.
We've talked a lot about where the program's been and where it is now. How do you see it evolving?
Well, we have to be real careful about growth, because if it just becomes another come one, come all program and you don't have the resources to give everyone the attention that we currently give them, then you can get into real trouble. There's another aspect that concerns me, because around the country, first of all, scholar development is so new that it is not a recognized and routine feature of university budgets. And as long as there's a tradition of success, then universities tend to support it. But once there's some lapse, or the individuals leave who've been involved, who understand how it works, then there has been some indication around the country that those programs will disappear. And that's one reason I'm excited about the Henry Bellman Endowment, is that to forestall that, or to make sure that doesn't happen, if we can cause the endowment to take place, then everything that we're currently doing now will remain, no matter what happens to the state budget. So you have to be careful about continuity, and at some point, I suppose, the people, my secretary and I will want to go do something else. Not yet, but at some point, and I want definitely to be in a position where everything that we've done through WINTS and through the Cambridge program and all the mentoring that we do remains in place. And I've got some ideas on how we can make that happen.
A transition plan in mind.
Yeah.
But do you see it, the components of it, do you see anything added or new as it evolves and changes, and anything you do a little differently?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, when you think of the things that these students do, going overseas, doing research, taking high-level classes, that's all a winning combination. I suppose that one thing that I'd like to see us do better, which we actually really focused on this year, is recruit these students again. I mean, it now is a national game that starts in high school. And if you let a year or two go by, it takes a long time to recover. So I'm trying to be more aware of the recruiting significance, and think that a lot of good things are happening at OSU that are going to allow us to do that.
Perhaps use the analogy of basketball, football recruiting, where you go out nationally, you start looking at kids maybe their junior year in high school, following them, trying to have.
There's no doubt that we're doing that. Yeah, we're actually doing that through our admissions office. Yeah, and we've been really lucky that at some campuses, the amount of support for these programs sometimes flags a little bit, but moving from Jim Halligan to David Schmidley, now to Burns, there has never been anyone who didn't understand the value of the program and give us full support. And right now with Burns here, who has a history of OSU that in a certain way reflects my own, we're here at about the same time. It's a great time to just continue to build on what we've done, and I see a lot of that happening with every passing month.
You ever see summer camps, maybe, like sports do?
Well, we do that in England. That's exactly what we do in England. So we do have that already. We take our best kids to England and give them a high-level course, a very intense course, and experience with that culture, and try to make them think of applying for a Rhodes or a Marshall as something they could do. So,
just think about high school kids, kind of the
high school kids. I did that. I did that in '81 and '82 for the Dean of Arts and Sciences. I don't think I'm going to do that again. Camp counselor, no thanks.
Are there some keys in your mind? You touched on some of those, so maybe a repetitious question, but to the continued success of the program, sure, you talk about continuity. I guess keeping faculty that are really passionate about it involved. Other keys to continuing the excellence.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're exactly right about all of that, the research going overseas. Jerry All does a great job with our study abroad program generally, and we tap into that. I think that one thing that we have to be very careful of is to make sure that this program is not perceived as any particular college's domain, and that we understand that the key to motivating students is an interdisciplinary appeal. One of the things that I feel most fortunate about is that I'm able to interact with faculty in agriculture, engineering, education, business, arts and sciences, human environmental sciences, and I love talking to faculty about their research and getting them to nominate students for this program. And I think that all those faculty understand that we're going at this in an interdisciplinary way. And that is something that I hope that OSU is always able to do. Because when you look at the number of students who've come out of engineering and agriculture, we had 4 straight Truman Scholars out of agricultural economics. And Lewis Blair, the person I mentioned earlier, contacted me and said he wanted to come down and visit agriculture to see what we were giving our students, which was satisfying to me because early in my career I was sent to Kansas State, which was already having success, with the same instructions, and I was actually able to train with the person up there who was making it happen for Kansas State. So the fact that the Truman Foundation then said, well, let's go see what OSU is doing, made me feel that we'd arrived.
Full circle. Right?
Yeah.
Bob, what's given you the most personal, professional satisfaction from your participation in the Scholar Development Recognition Program?
Well, I mean, every student has been different, and they've all given me something to learn by my interaction with them. Of all the students that I've worked with, all the successful ones and a lot of the ones who weren't successful, I can relate some particular aspect of that person's character and qualifications that really meant a lot. None of them seem at all the same to me. And I've got friendships now with students that are going to last me for a long time. Just to go back to the beginnings of my interview here, I really think that what Edward Jones and all the other people I've mentioned and I've been able to contribute to OSU is something that I couldn't even imagined when I was a student here, and maybe makes up for a little lost time, and puts OSU in a position to really thrive in the future. I mean, all those things mean a lot to me. I never really wanted to live anywhere else but Stillwater, Oklahoma. I can't explain that, but I did. That's kind of the situation, and friendships with faculty, being able to raise my family in Stillwater. It's just been an amazing ride.
Looking back, what would you have done differently in the program? Can you think of it? You said, well, if we could have changed something, there's some things you'd have changed?
That's really good. Boy, we had so many fortuitous things happen that I couldn't have envisioned, like the Wentz program being turned over to us for that. People just seemed to show up at the right time when they were really needed to plan a class or to give a talk or to find a student. I think that the opportunity that I had to get involved in at the national level was, again, something that I didn't even think about, but it really worked to OSU's advantage and promoted our name even more so. I guess I wish that I had been more technically proficient. There are a lot of my colleagues around the country who do a better job because they're so capable with their computers to keep up with their students and to manage their students and to stay in touch with their students. And I've always been good at the personal touch, personal involvement. Come in my office and let's talk about this. I wish I could have added that too, but it was just beyond me. But I think to go back to another question, to take the next step, a future director is going to have to be a lot more proficient with technology than I have been, because all of the applications now are online.
Bob, looking back, what would you have done the same, and what are the things you say?
Talk to the students.
This is important.
Talk to the students. Be with them at every opportunity. Encourage them. Give them things they need to be reading. Refer them to faculty. We have a revolving open door in our office, and I've never had a student come through the door that I won't go out and meet if I'm not doing something out of the office. But these are high-stress things that we ask students to do, and they need to know that someone's in their camp who really thinks a lot of their abilities and what they're going through. And that is something that, even if I'd been more technically proficient, I hope I wouldn't have given up. And it's also very satisfying. I'll tell if I'm assuming we're about finished for this session anyway, but this is a kind of a humorous observation by a college roommate who said, "Bob, this is rather irritating. You spent 5 years at OSU, actually more than that for graduate school, sitting in the student union talking to interesting people and probably wasting a lot of your parents' good money. Now, for your career, you're sitting in the student union talking to interesting people and wasting the taxpayers' money." That was Dennis McNeil, my college roommate, and he's a great person, and he and I have a lot of fun, and I've always gotten a kick out of that story because there's an element of truth to that. That's what I do. I get to talk to great people in the student union. So,
Bob, how do
what
you hope people remember you and your role in establishing the Scholar's Office? How do you hope people remember Bob?
Well, I hope that I'll be remembered as a good teacher, because that's the part about my job that I do that still gives me the most pleasure. But also that I was a friend, not just to the students who won these awards, but that I really had a connection with a lot of wonderful OSU undergraduates over the years. And that somehow what we did helped bring together OSU. And when we met Blaine Gredeman after his Rhodes win, we took people from all over the campus down to the airport, and it was really neat to see people from all over the campus who just were proud of what he had done. So yeah, and the alums, I think that they have begun to see that their degree really means something on the national and international level too. So again, that's not what I hope for me, that's what I hope for my office. And for me, it's just been a special treat to be involved.
Sort of a wrap question, but we've talked about it in a lot of ways, but maybe one more time. Why is, in your opinion, is this program so important to Oklahoma State University?
Well, I think OSU always had a great reputation as a kind of a fun, friendly place to be, but a lot of studies showed that our reputation academically never really reached what we knew was going on here. So to the extent that we were able to put ourselves out in the forefront as an academic school, I think is important. I think that all land grants struggle with that a little bit, but OSU perhaps more than any. We need to get a Phi Beta Kappa chapter. We deserve a Phi Beta Kappa chapter. We don't have one yet, but we're going to get one. And it's all reputation, at a certain in some of those things. So we've had really great students doing wonderful things, and slowly I think OSU has seen its image improve as a result. The Honors College is another way.
So, kind of in your words a little bit, the program's helped is to help perhaps raise that level a little bit, but as much as anything else, it's helped recognize what was already there.
Correct.
You had people who've been CEOs of major.
Well, I've
500 companies.
had panelists on these major national awards that say, we get students from these very prestigious schools who come in, and they're kind of all the same. They're real confident and they're smooth, etc. But there's something different when a solid student from Stillwater, Oklahoma, who's a double major with a foreign language and has this wonderful work ethic, who grew up on a farm, comes in, like Courtney Timmons, for instance, comes in and just blows us away with her enthusiasm and her leadership and her knowledge. And so I think we had a secret weapon all those years that we hadn't been using, which is the quality of our student population. And they've proven a lot of us right.
Bob, what else have we not covered? There are some things that we'd like to discuss that perhaps we haven't touched on.
Oh, I'm sure I'll think of a million things when I leave, but that was a good set of questions that you had, and it really allowed me to both think freely, but at the same time focus on some things. My only fear is there are so many students I should have acknowledged that somebody will see this someday and say, why didn't he mention me?
Yeah.
I thought we were friends.
So maybe we can make this again same time, okay?
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there was, one thing that was you and I were involved in was the top graduating seniors, and I think to show that OSU is always for improvement is that, as you recall, Blaine Gredeman was not chosen as a top senior, and you and I were really in a fix on that.
Yeah. Front page article.
I'm happy to say that thanks to your leadership and the people like Ann Scott and Larry Schell, that we fixed that. And that would never happen again. And now, this last year, out of the 14 students who were named top graduating seniors, 11 of them were honors and scholar development connections. But we also have athletes, and we have non-traditional students with children, international students. And again, I think that it is the story of OSU that working together, we can put something in place that really makes a difference in the life of the institution.
Now that they come to Seniors Significance Award too.
Exactly.
Top
Yeah.
1%.
Bigger number off the bat, and then more variety in the top graduating seniors. That's another gratifying experience that we've all been a part of.
You're very much engaged and involved with it, Bob, and appreciate that too.
Yeah, it's fun.
After I finished the interview the first time, I realized, as anyone would with such a large number of people to think about, that I'd left out some important figures in our office, which I regretted. And one of them, of course, is especially critical because of the long time we worked together. I guess it's a case of you sometimes forget the ones you love the most. So I wanted to clarify that and have requested an addition to the tape so that I can clear up some of those things. And here's what I wrote in order to make that clear about those who've been so helpful. President Halligan realized the importance of our work and success and made it possible to establish our office independent from its other earlier responsibilities. This kind of office was a rare thing nationally at the time, and our model has been imitated often. In gratitude, one of the first major financial gifts came in his honor from friend Jim Carricker, and later the Scholars Hall of Fame was named after him and Ann. I could name others, but have to conclude with Gail Gilliland, our office secretary and manager, who has been as engaged in this effort as much as anyone, and I consider her an educator of top quality in addition to her clerical duties. The students adore her, and she is able to keep very complicated budgets and materials organized in a way that amazes me and others. She's the type of person who keeps OSU going behind the scenes through thick and thin, and we owe her more than we can ever repay, from my own gratifying career to the success of countless students and faculty. She and I have shared this professional relationship for more than 20 challenging and exciting years, and I can't imagine any time in our office or any greater future success in our office without her steady hand at the wheel. So, Gail, maybe this will make it more special for me to have presented this at this time. And I hope you know how much I love and appreciate you. Thanks.